Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Sko Show on My Life Sports. I'm Shawn. Drotar. With me today is going to be Danny Bailey. We're going to talk about, of course, the Buffs' big game against TCU. It's obviously a major part of this schedule when you're talking about this run of conference games. Or for the Buffs, they want to get back to 500. So as we take a look at what went right in the Buffalo's last win, there are a lot of things to like. Specifically, the performance of Kaidon Salter and the offense. The running game was shorthanded. We'll talk more about that in a bit as well. But they managed to get it done. Salter played free and loose. Second week in a row where there is a little bit of opening there when you're looking at the way that Salter has played under Pat Shermer. You wonder, actually, to a certain point, we'll never know. They're going to be pretty opaque about it. But if you wonder if Byron Leftwich is maybe having a little bit of influence there. But Kaidon Salter has looked like a guy that's far more comfortable in his role. He looks more confident. It changes things, Danny Bailey, for the way the Buffaloes can approach everything. Obviously, they need to get the quarterback situation under control. And in this case, now it feels like under Salter, at least things have stabilized, and the Buffs have to find a way to continue to build with this athletic quarterback at the helm.
Yeah, Kaidon Salter has definitely stepped up a little bit since the season started, and he's kind of grown into that role. We talked about it before, how Pat Shermer hasn't really had a dual threat quarterback before, so we need to see him be able to kind of form his offense to what suits Kaidon Salter. Salter would have had an even better game against BYU, except they had to call a couple back because of penalties.
Yes.
So we'll see where they can continue to take this as they keep investing in that run game. Obviously, defense still a concern with letting BYU come back after you have that early lead. And as Coach Prime talked about, not being able to finish games has been something consistently that's been a problem with this team. So they got a shot. We talked about it before the show, a puncher's chance, as it were. With 2 touchdown underdogs again, essentially 13 and a half,
which
is
not coincidental. Well, it is coincidental, but hopefully it's not. It doesn't feel that way. The exact same line that they had in Coach Prime's debut as the head coach of the Buffaloes, in which they went in to Fort Worth back then and stunned the world in that 45-42 game that started his tenure there. But yeah, the point you make about penalties are important, Danny, because one of the things that you want to look at with this team going forward is penalties, that, especially against BYU, a lot of early defensive holding, pass interference type of things. The Buffs have to find a way to stay with the wide receivers and not be quite so handsy with them. Obviously, that's something that gets you in trouble, not as much as it would in the NFL, but it's still not good when you're extending drives. And yes, you look going forward about the idea of the running game for Salter. That's an adjustment too. You don't want those called back. Omarion Miller had a penalty, calling a big one back in the second half of the game that might have been really impactful. Obviously, you have to be aware of that. Some of that is getting used to it, right? Shedeur Sanders was not that kind of guy. He could run when he needed to, but he's not a runner. Kaidon Salter most certainly is a skilled runner, to the point they're going to dial up some intentional quarterback carries. And that's something the Buffs have to be cognizant of. If you are winning on the margins, if you're trying to win in close games, of which the Buffs are trying to do, obviously, in this sort of rebuilding year, you can't make a lot of those mistakes. So penalties on defense that extend drives, penalties on offense that lead to punts that might have otherwise led to even a field goal, that can be the difference maker, not only in this game, but in all the games going forward. So for the Buffs, attention to detail, making sure you don't get a little bit too grabby here on there in either side of the ball is going to be really important, not only in this game, but for the remainder of the season and the Big 12 conference run.
Especially when we see guys like Draylon Miller start to make an impact, when we talk about some of the injuries at running back later on. Having his versatility there, that's something Michael Welch talked about to the media this week, that having him be able to line up in the backfield and take a handoff, or be a very effective receiver out of the backfield, that makes defenses have to be on their heels a little bit. So I'm excited to see how they continue to develop the offense, because we haven't necessarily seen a ton of explosive plays, but we have seen the defense give up explosive plays. And so if you're doing that, it's a bad recipe for success.
Yeah, including a lot of runs to the quarterback. We'll talk about that in a bit as well. The injury list for the Buffs is long, and it's disturbing, because you're talking about, again, for the second game in a row, DeKalon Taylor and Simeon Price, the two most effective, at least running backs at that point for the Buffs, are listed as out. That's obviously the first thing you look at. Then you also look at that defensive line where Samuel Okunlola is listed as out. Tariq Thomas is out. Gabriel Lightfoot, of course, we know is out, having his injury. But Anquan Barnes and Tavian Coleman also listed as doubtful. That is 5 defensive linemen. That's a problem. And you're going to have to make sure for the Buffs that you really shore up what you need to do. when you're talking about the pass rush and containing the run. Fortunately, the running game is not really what TCU does best. They are more of a passing team. That might give the Buffs not an edge, but it wouldn't hurt them as much as it would against a lot of other teams. We'll talk about that in a bit, but we want to, of course, get a chance to shout out our friends at Peckish. The reason we have the Sko Show, 2 different locations up in Boulder and the Hill, the one that you know and love, just a couple steps down as the new location is open, 3 times the size, all of the great wings, all of the sauces, all of the pizzas. You have an opportunity to have TVs everywhere. It's a great place to catch the game, and you have more room to do it because 3 times the size. And of course, you have the one down in the DTC out at the Bellevue station, just basically hop, skip, and a jump from I-25 in Bellevue. If you have not been up to Peckish in Boulder, you don't know what you're missing, but you can find out if you're down south there, because all of the things from Peckish that are up on the hill, they're right down there as well. The wings, the pizza, the beers, the TVs everywhere. Obviously, a great place to watch a football game, so much so that on Thursdays, our own Nate Lundy is over there prior to Thursday Night Football, doing a little live conversation there about those games, because it's a great opportunity to catch all of it. And remember, you can also they have a happy hour specials from 3 to 6 every day. They also have lunch specials for $10. Try to find that just about anywhere. Or you can find that all at Peckish, the preferred dining partner of CU Athletics, not something that they take very lightly. And we know that the Buffs themselves have spent more than a few bits there. In fact, while we're at that, Danny, why don't we pay attention to a little bit earlier this week? Payton Craft, who's often on this program with me as well, had an opportunity to be up at the Peckish location on the hill with senior safety Ben Finneseth. And they were having, obviously, a discussion about a few things. You can catch it over on the YouTube, and with Peyton's channels, of course, you can find all of that there. But we wanted to share a couple with you because Finneseth has been, he's kind of been like that guy, right? Sort of, as we call, friend of the program. But it seems like when a big play needs to be made, Ben Finneseth seems to be able to make it. He's been a clutch guy. He's running guys down, causing fumbles. He's running guys down, saving touchdowns, making big plays throughout his career. He had an opportunity to sit down with Payton Craft. She asked him a little bit about his relationship with Coach Deion Sanders. And it was a treat to hear it, because some of it was pretty entertaining, given the fact that, yeah, Ben Finneseth has some ideas of something he wants to do with Coach, but realizes he might not be the guy to do it. You'll see.
I have a pair of Coach Prime slippers that I took from him.
You took for him, or he gave it to you?
He gave them to me.
All right, there you go.
Yeah. But took from him. But they're yeah. I wear those around. Mm-hmm. You know, those are a must pack. Okay. I don't know what it is. They're nice. And I was like, hey,
you want them? Yeah.
I'm gonna have these if you're good with that. So yeah, got them. I've thought of some really funny pranks that I like pranking people. Yeah. And I'm like, you know what? This will, like, some of them would just hit differently with Coach Prime, and I'm like, it wouldn't be the same repercussions if I was Shador. You know what I'm saying? Yeah,
that's fair. I mean,
well, low-key, maybe Trav would even have. You know what? Trav would probably have less repercussions.
So you have a prank in mind, or can we not say that on here?
Nah, can't say it.
Can't say it. Well, bummer. It's going to be a secret. No one's going to know.
No.
It's Ben.
No. You might hear about it at some point.
At some point, maybe.
Ben Finneseth has been kicked off the team. Oh, whoops.
All right.
I mean, at a certain point, you're a senior, so you can pick your window here. But but you know, good awareness by Ben Finneseth. You're like, hey, wait, yeah, certain guys have a little more leeway. Maybe I'm not the guy, but you don't want to share the prank anyway. You know, you might want to use it later.
You can always use it on someone else if you don't use it on Coach Prime, even if it is for Coach Prime, even funnier because it's him. It's cool to see the way that these guys talk about Prime, because he is very different from them generationally, but because they all love football so much, they have this strong bond. We obviously saw it with Travis last year. It's a little bit different because this isn't a Heisman Trophy winner who's been with you since the jump and took a chance on Jackson State and then came and took another chance on Colorado. But seeing the way that Finneseth talks about just stealing the slippers, even though he didn't really steal them, Coach Prime was probably fine with him having them.
Yeah.
But he initiated the acquisition of the slippers.
I loved a little bit. So, it's like, you mind if I keep these? As he said, pretty good. Well, put it this way. I mean, smart to ask. Two, Coach Prime can get more. I don't think there's a major concern there. And so I kind of get it, especially when you're on the road. But Finneseth of there, obviously having a chance to talk with Payton, having some wings in the meantime as well. Senior out of Durango, so local product here in Finneseth. And Payton had an opportunity to talk to him as we get into the Big 12 conference play about some of his best memories now that he is in his final season at Boulder.
Best home field moment at Fulton.
Ooh. I got two. Okay. The Baylor game in 2024.
Oh, yes.
That was
great.
That was just like everything about it was like just crazy. The rain, Hail Marys.
Yep.
Flooding the field after, insane. Or the year that we went 1-11, the only game that we won that year was the Cal game at home.
Yeah,
I was actually chosen as the captain for that game.
Oh, all right.
So that game was just special to me because of that. Obviously that season wasn't quite picture perfect.
But that moment.
Yeah, but that moment was super important to me. So, yeah.
All right, and last question. Best part of being a CU buff?
Best part. I think the way that everyone's embraced who I am and has accepted me for who I am. As crazy and weird as I can be, everyone just accepts it and loves on me, and I appreciate that. And no one has tried to change me and make me into a different person that I'm not. So, yeah, I appreciate that part about being a CU buff.
That answer is so great. I mean, obviously you think about his point about the Baylor game, and that was obviously an amazing game in which the Buffs, Shooter Sanders hit LaJohntay Wester.
That's one of a lot of people's favorite memories from the last couple of years.
Yeah, on that Hail Mary in regulation, and then Michael Welch punches it in, and they win that game. Keep in mind, I went back and looked at it. Obviously, I was in the press box for that game, but I went back and looked at the ESPN analytics for that game. At one point late in the game, the ESPN win probability for Baylor was 99.1%. So, yeah, those are the ones you probably remember. But it's that last answer. And I think when we're looking at a Buff season, which may or may not end up in a bowl, and that feels like a big step backwards, even though I'm not entirely sure it is. We'll find out kind of at the end of the season. But the part of that to come away with the answer from Finneseth, Danny, that I think is so fascinating is, like you said, nobody's really tried to change him. That if there is somebody who understands, first thing you have to do is just be you. And as long as that fits in the team philosophy, you're okay. Well, that would be Deion Sanders. And to hear that basically he kind of hasn't changed that he doesn't hold anybody to a different standard that he had when he was playing back in college and even in the pros, that he's okay with having individuals. It becomes about recruiting the right individuals. To me, that is probably as high a compliment as a player can actually make about the Buffalo's football program under Deion Sanders that doesn't have to do anything with the field itself.
And sometimes I think when you have a more level playing field, you don't have those high tier, top end star players. Everybody kind of takes a little more ownership of the entirety of the program because you don't have those main leaders. So we're seeing that with guys that are stepping up into leadership roles, weren't necessarily expected to be leaders, but they've risen to the occasion because there's not necessarily that one guy who's calling all the shots.
Yeah.
So now they can kind of do a leadership by committee, if you will, and that allows more people to have a say. It creates more cohesion with the group too. Like, these guys obviously like each other, and that can be hard when you're losing, to stay on the same page and to keep lifting each other up. That's one thing Coach Prime does a really good job of, and his players are embodying that.
Yeah, it is interesting to look at that, especially the way you talk about that there isn't really like the star power part of it. And we talked about the injuries coming into this game, and that's obviously a big time concern. But then again, because it works the way it does, as you pointed out, you don't really have that top end star. The defensive line problems are very real, and the running back problems are real. But Michael Welch in the last couple of games had 67 yards in both games. He's been effective. He averaged over 6 per carry against BYU. And then you brought on Draylen Miller. We know that Kaidon Salter is going to run. We know that's part of it. He had a touchdown on the ground against the Cougars in that game. But Draylen Miller is an interesting part of it. After the game, Miller, who ran for 8 carries, 52 yards, and a touchdown, and caught 2 for 27 as well. going to be a big part of the offense going forward. And quite frankly, to hear Deion Sanders after the game talk about it, Danny, basically Miller is now a running back. In fact, he even said how that's how we're going to use him going forward. He pointed out that Marshall Faulk, the Buffs running backs coach, is happy to have him. So the idea is, look, he's basically going to be a running back, which tells you maybe that Taylor and Price's injuries may linger. The fact that they've decided to make that move, Dallin Hayden also trying to work his way back into health. But Miller's got a solid frame. He's basically going to kind of play that Deebo Samuel role. And according to Draylen Miller, that's something that he had thought about even as late as last year. So for the Buffs, I think you're maximizing your talent as best as you can. Yes, it's part of the necessity given the injuries, but I do wonder if sometimes you don't end up where you're supposed to be anyway, because I like the offense a little bit more with Draylen Miller getting straight up carries out of the backfield, no gimmicks necessary.
It is also a little bit of a crowded receiver room because you've got Omarion Miller, you have Joseph Williams, Sincere Brown, and then you got the youngsters coming up like Quentin Gibson. But
Gibson
they still haven't really used Zach Atkins much. I would like to see them be able to get the tight end involved a little more, because that is a huge opportunity for them to open up the rest of the offense. But when that's not really a threat and all you have to do is worry about the outsides or stopping the run, makes things pretty easy for an opposing defense.
Yeah, and of course, Miller can be a receiver out of the backfield just as easily, but you're right. It helps separate a little bit. The leading receiver on the team, Joseph Williams, 14 catches, the top in receptions on the team, 220 yards, tops in that. 2 touchdowns tied for the lead in that, too. Sincere Brown has 2 memorable ones, obviously, down the side, and Omarion Miller's a part of it. And then DeKalen Taylor was next. Obviously, he is going to be out for this game. Isaiah Harge also expected to be, he's doubtful. Harge kind of replaced a little bit by that youngster Gibson that you talked about, who's been electric as a returner. Very, very dangerous.
Crazy good.
That's a good sign. You got a returner that has been very, very effective. So it's not as if the Buffs don't have enough weapons offensively to keep with TCU if they continue to play well and they don't make the kind of mistakes. They can't have the holding call, like you pointed out earlier in the show, that hurt them in the previous game. But it really is going to be up to the defense. We know the line is beaten up, but one of the challenges the Buffs have had is containing quarterbacks. And we know that rushing quarterbacks, guys like Hayden King of Georgia Tech, we know he's going to run. We knew all that. But when you're getting gouged by the Bear Bachmeyers of the world, or even the Connor Wheatlands of the world, in which he had his career high in rushing yardage in Houston at halftime, that's bad. So hopefully we don't see the same thing out of Josh Hoover. Hoover, not a runner at all, quarterback there for TCU. Obviously, the stats don't matter very much because the passing sacks come out of the rushing stats. It's a little bit different. So he's got -8 yards, but he hasn't been sacked that often either. Only 8 sacks, but on those 8 sacks, he's lost 61 yards. But Hoover is just not a runner. And so hopefully for the Buffs, that's one thing that you can take out of the equation. But I assure you, given the Buffs' challenges this season in containing that, I bet you see Hoover get a couple carries early on just to test it and see if the Buffs are actually ready to stop a quarterback running. The other thing that's interesting to me, Danny, is the weapons out of the backfield. It's, again, not a team that runs a ton, only 534 yards on the year rushing, but they do receive out of the backfield. And that's another thing the Buffs have had some challenges with as well. Jeremy Payne's got almost 100 yards out of the backfield and a touchdown. But keep an eye, by the way, on maybe sort of their Swiss Army knife, Joseph Manjack, the fourth, the receiver there. He has thrown and completed a pass. He has run the ball, and he has caught the ball, kind of their number 3 receiver. But McAllister, their top guy there, he's dangerous, 300-plus yards on the year, 3 touchdowns. They're going to have to step up. That's a DJ McKinney job, but it's going to be more than DJ McKinney if the Buffs defensive line, is so beaten up that you're not going to get after a guy in Hoover, who, by the way, really hasn't taken a lot of sacks anyway.
Hasn't taken a lot of sacks, has thrown 4 picks. And then we talked about
11 touchdowns.
Yes,
though.
exactly. Well, yeah, when you've got 1,200+ yards through four games, that's doing pretty well.
Yeah.
You talked about McAllister and Barnes. Those guys both listed as questionable, but obviously you expect them to play.
Yeah, until they don't suit up.
But maybe they could be a little limited, which would be nice. Coach Prime talked about that cornerback position in his press conference this week. Obviously, good guy to talk on that subject. Probably the best guy to talk on that subject. And he was talking about how he doesn't want these guys to be playing not to get beat. If you're playing not to get beat, you're not going to be making game-changing plays. He needs them to play to make those game-breaking plays that are going to turn things around. So, yeah, if they can maybe maybe take a couple chances and hopefully they cash out for you. Obviously, you don't want to take too big of chances, but at a certain point, you're going to have to start making plays that can win you the game instead of trying not to lose a game.
Right. And you're going to have to do it, as we pointed out, without penalties. So you have to be aggressive, but you can't get penalties that extend drives. That's been a major issue for the Buffs on multiple scoring.
Especially on the outside.
Yeah. Multiple scoring drives for BYU in that 3-point loss last week. BYU had a couple of those scoring drives assisted by first downs on defensive penalties. 3 times, as a matter of fact, on scoring drives, defensive penalties got them the first down. So you can't extend drives. But you are right, given the fact they're nearly 2 touchdown underdogs, and quite frankly, they should be. If you've watched any of TCU's games and you've watched the Buffs, you're like, yeah, going into Fort Worth, you should expect that. I don't think they can win this game unless they win the turnover battle. I just don't even see how they can do it. You're going to have to get yourselves a couple extra drives. So you're right. You may have to gamble a little bit. And DJ McKinney is going to be leaned on. He is probably the best available player on this defense. And he's going to need to have a big game, whether it's against McAllister or whoever he gets if McAllister's not there, because that's going to be their lead guy. So it's a big DJ McKinney game, knowing that he's going to have to cover for better and for longer, given that you can't expect the Buffs to get an awful lot of pressure on Hoover realistically, unless they're bringing blitzes. And if you're bringing blitzes, then you're really taking chances. So the Buffs injury situation, I think, limits what they can do. But again, given that TCU's offense is pretty pass-centric, they run when they, on occasion. This is a team that wants to chuck it. 300-plus passing yards per game from Hoover, almost 3 touchdowns a game from Hoover. They want to move it around. So if you're the Buffs, you're okay with them being one-dimensional as long as you keep them one-dimensional. The passes are coming. Have to find a way to stop the run, keep it stopped early, find a way to focus on that. And yeah, if you don't make mistakes, maybe you win the turnover battle and you find yourself ready to steal one. That's going to be important because after this game, win or lose, things do not get easier, Danny.
No, it only gets tougher from here as you go through the Big 12. They've really got to be able to take some things forward from this game because Iowa State is going to be tough, even at Folsom Field.
Sure.
That one's a midday game. We just found that out, and they're 14 right now. But who knows? They could go up, they could go down. We'll see. And then at Utah, that's always tough. That's always tough.
They're no longer ranked, but who cares? That
doesn't even matter. Yeah. So the next couple are going to be a little tricky, and maybe you get a little bit of a reprieve against Arizona. But either way, it's conference play from here on out, and you haven't shown that you're even middle of the pack in the conference.
No, not yet. Now, hopefully things are, because the offense is stabilizing, because Kaidon Salter kind of has now taken the reins pretty clearly. The plan for the Buffs is back on. It is Kaidon Salter's show until or unless it becomes Julian Lewis's going forward. And I think for the Buffs, they hope that's in 2026. But, things spiral out of control here. That's why the loss, I think, to BYU was so disheartening, because it was a top 25 team. They were right in it. They feel like they could have won that, maybe even should have won that. You're going to have to steal one of these couple because they're 2-3 now. You can't drop this to TCU, Iowa State, and Utah and then find yourself 2-6 and then have to basically still try to make a bowl game. And that's where things get really tricky. So for the Buffs, this is going to be a big game. It's also a big opportunity to make a statement once again, and maybe get in TCU's head, because you've already beaten them once there under Coach Prime, and it was an embarrassing loss for TCU, even though it probably shouldn't have been as much because so much of their talent had left after that appearance in the national championship game. But nevertheless, you can go in there. Maybe that's in a couple of these guys' heads, and we'll see how it goes. But it will be a tough game for the Buffs. We'll find out what happens, obviously, this weekend. National broadcast, surprise, surprise. They're all national broadcast. It's the Colorado Buffaloes. They'll go ahead and play that on Saturday night, and we'll give you the latest about it as we get back. But make sure you check out Payton Craft's interview with the whole interview with Ben Finneseth. That's obviously a lot of fun. Glad to be able to bring you a couple of those. We'll catch up with Payton next week about it. But thanks to our friends at Peckish for getting this all set up. As we pointed out, 2 locations for you over at the Bellevue Station down at the DTC, and of course up on the hill where you expect. PeckishCO.com for the menus, for all of the options. I am a hot sauce guy, and I've had all of them but the one, because I'm not a maniac after all. But man, such a great variety of sauces on the wings. You can get the dry rubs, you can get the sauces. The pizzas are terrific. One of the things we learned from Byron and his team is they didn't really have a pizza recipe. They hired their baker, and their baker went and researched pizzas and came up with his own thing. That's why that pizza crust is so unique there in the pizza at Peckish. is so unique. So make sure you check it out. If you haven't got the wings, you can go get the pizza, wings. There's other options as well. And all of it terrific. And obviously something that the Buffs themselves love. You can just watch Ben Finneseth his house's plate of wings with Payton during the interview to get an idea of how good it is and how quickly you can enjoy it. Nothing goes better with football than, pizza, wings, and beer. You get all of that at Peckish, plus big screen TVs everywhere. A great place to watch the game. Location in Boulder on the Hill, 3 times larger than before. So thanks to Peckish for all of their support. Danny, before we let this go, I'm not going to call the Buffaloes winning this game. Obviously, I'm not. But there are other games to schedule. There are other teams where I looked at it and said they have a longer shot. The truth of the matter was Georgia Tech was one of those. And then they were in that one. So, you got a little confidence now with your quarterback. You have a little bit of an identity, even though you have injuries. If the Buffs offense can generate points, I think they will be in this game late. And if you're in this game late, you've got a chance. Hopefully that's what we'll see.
Georgia Tech also might be better than we thought they were coming in because they're still undefeated right now.
Well, that was one 17. I sat up there at Peckish on the hill and said they're not going to win this game. That's okay. And it was obviously closer than intended. So you try to stay close and you try to make sure you give it a game. And obviously the BYU loss was disheartening to be that close. But then again, the counterpoint is you were 3 points away from knocking off a top 25 team. And TCU is not that. So maybe you can go in there and make a statement, get yourself back to 500, and then keep yourself right in the public eye as expected, because that Iowa State game also an ESPN national game because, Buffs. That's why we put this together. It's obviously a treat to be able to get it to you, and we'll get back at it next week after the TCU game and take a look at what went right, what went wrong, and what it means going into Iowa State. So that'll do it for us. Nothing to do but play the games, and Danny and I don't do that, so we'll hand it off to our friends up in Boulder. But until then, Danny, for all of us at Mile High Sports, thanks for watching the Sko Show, and
Sko Buffs.
Buffs.